Okay, before I proceed to the subject, can anyone tell me what is the weightage of Indian polity in your entire preparation? Does it have weightage in both prelims as well as mains examination? Is it only relevant to prelims? Have you gone through the syllabus? How many of you have gone through the syllabus? Okay, if you have not gone through the syllabus, please go through the syllabus once. That is very, very important. You know about the syllabus. It has got relevance to both prelims as well as the mains examination. I am talking only about the subject polity. And can anyone tell me what is the weightage of the subject Indian polity in your prelims examination? 17 to 20 questions. How much you only? Huh? Okay, including, I'm just asking about polity. How many questions? 15 to 16 questions. All right. So if you see an average, if you see in the last 5 years, you can say it is 15 questions. 17 to 20 is on the little higher side, but it is not necessarily every year they may ask only 15 questions. Sometimes they may ask more also, sometimes they can ask less also. But if you take the average for the last 5 years, it is usually 15 questions. So 15 question means how much? Almost 30 marks out of 200 marks. You know that 100 questions are there in your GS paper 1. So that means 30 marks, that means approximately 1/6 of your weightage is going to be from Indian polity. Maybe a little less, but yes, 1/6. That means without Indian polity and having a good knowledge about the subject Indian polity, clearing the prelims is not going to be a very easy task. Okay, so that is going to be definitely sure. So you should take this subject very seriously, not only this particular subject, in fact all the subjects. You'll have to take it very seriously. So that is going to help you. Now coming to your mains part. Does Indian polity has relevance in your mains areas as well? And does anyone know in which subject Indian polity is relevant? In which paper? In your general studies? GS paper 2, very good. In GS paper 2, yes. So Indian polity, if you take, so it has got relevance in prelims as well. So approximately here it is 15 questions in your prelims, and mains it has got relevance in your GS paper 2. And in GS paper 2, does anyone know the entire GS paper 2 is for 250 marks. Out of 250 marks, what is the weightage of Indian polity in that? Do you know how many questions UPSC does ask in your GS paper 2? 20 questions. I've seen it. Very good. 20 questions. Out of 20 questions, these 20 questions are likely to come from 4 major areas. One is Indian polity, other is governance. There is an area what is called as social justice, and then the fourth area is what is called as international relations. So largely the questions are likely to come from these areas. So do you know what is the weightage of Indian polity in this, of these 4 areas? 50% of your answer, 50% of your question is going to be Indian polity. That is approximately 125 marks is going to be alone from Indian polity, and 75 marks will be combinedly from social justice and what is called as governance, and 50 marks is going to be from your international relations. So this is the pattern that UPSC has been following it. So 50% of your marks, that is 125 marks, is going to be, sorry, 125% is not the right thing, 125 marks is going to be from Indian polity in your GS paper 2. And this 125 marks is how much marks in your GS paper? How much marks is for GS paper? Overall, I'm talking about. No, not for the GS it is 1750. Overall it is 1750. For the GS, how much is the marks? There are 4 GS papers, GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. That is 1000 marks. So out of 1000 marks means 125 marks is 12.5% of the marks. That is 1/8 of your GS mark is going to be again from Indian polity. All right. So that is what is the weightage of Indian polity. So it's very important for both your prelims as well as the mains examination. So we'll try to understand them one by one. Okay. So initially we'll try to build the concepts, the keywords. Even before I go into the preamble, it will take us 2-3 classes before even we start the preamble to the Constitution of India. How many of you heard about the preamble to the Constitution of India? I've heard of this word preamble. Of course, you might know it because you have a political science background. So even before we start the preamble to the Constitution of India, it is going to take us at least 2 to 3 classes. So first I'll have to make you familiar with certain keywords, some of the features in the Indian constitutions, some of the important concepts. Then only I'll get into the preamble. All right. So today the first thing that I wanted to discuss is I wanted you to understand as to what is a constitution. That's basically what we are going to see the first topic. What does it mean by a constitution? So because when you talk of Indian polity, the most thing that we are going to study is basically about the Indian constitution. How many of you heard about the word constitution? Most of you heard about the word constitution. I think online students, you might also heard about the word constitution. So what is the Indian constitution? Every country might have their own constitution, but we are much concerned about the Constitution of India. So what is basically this constitution is what we are going to study. But before I study the constitution, make you explain the Constitution of India, let me just give an example of what we are going to study. Now, how many of you have ever been fined by the traffic police? Have you ever got an experience of being fined by the traffic police? Yes? Can you, if you can share the reason, can you tell me what was the reason for that? You didn't wear the crash helmet, so you are fined. Okay. Anybody else? So you entered into the no entry. Okay, wrong direction. Okay, whatever it is. For somebody, it can be not wearing the seat belt probably when they're driving the car. For somebody, not having probably the insurance. For somebody, it may be drink and driving also. Whatever may be the reason. So people are getting fined. Now, what do you think allows them to fine you? See, the traffic police cannot just come and arbitrarily fine you. What allows or what gives them the authority to do all those things? What gives them the authority to do all those things? Rules. Very good. That means there is some rules. You do not know where the rules has come from, but all that you can see is, okay, there is some rules that is allowing them to do this. And that is the reason that they are doing it legitimately. That is a legitimate thing. It is not an illegitimate thing for the traffic police to fine you. Legitimately, that authority is conferred upon them. And how that authority is conferred upon them? Because there is some rules. You may not be aware of where the rules come from, but however, you can say that there is a rule. So here let us stop it. Now, therefore, to understand as to what is a constitution, I'll put you, there can be, so why do you think that rule has to be there? So if I have to extend the discussion a little further, now why do you think that rule is conferring a traffic police officer to impose fine when probably when you're violating that particular rule? What could be the reason behind the rule in the first place? To maintain the decorum of whom? So just let us talk of only the traffic issues. Now, what will happen if this rule is not there and if the traffic police is not finding it? Do you think it will be a chaos? Because everybody will go in any direction, whatever they want. Somebody will overspeed. There can be accident. So it won't be very organized, and things will not be proper. So therefore, there are certain rules to ensure that things are happening properly. everybody is benefited out of a particular system. Everybody has an equal chance probably. If everybody doesn't have, the rules are not there, probably a person with big vehicle can threaten the others, but the traffic light is there, everybody is allowed to move. So basically what happens in a country like India, what the example that I have taken is a very small example, that a rule which authorizes or which enables, which empowers a traffic police officer to fine when you violate that particular rule. That is only a very minute aspect of governing a big country like India. And to govern a big country like India, you need to have one fundamental rule book. Now, the traffic rule is not a very important rule, although it is a rule that we agree. But it is not a very fundamental or an important rule book. And what is the most fundamental and the most important rule book to govern our country, such a huge country like India, is nothing but the Constitution of India. So therefore, what is a constitution? To put it in a very simple way, the constitution is nothing but a fundamental rule book of the country. So how can you put it? It is nothing but it is a fundamental rule book of the country. The constitution is the fundamental rule book of our country. And this constitution allows us to do a number of things. This constitution gives us the information about how our country is to be governed. So somebody asks you, what do you say with regard to the constitution? It's as simple as that. What is a constitution? A constitution is the fundamental rule book of the country. And the constitution gives us the idea as to how the country is to be governed. And suppose if our country is to be governed, what are the basic things that you need? For example, if India as a country has to be governed properly, first of all, the basic information that you need to have is who is supposed to govern. There has to be an authority to govern. There are people in our country, but the people has to be governed by a particular authority. Now the question is, who will govern? Now, if I ask this particular question, who governs our country? Can you give me an example who governs our country? If you know, who governs our country? Government? Very good. So government governs our country. Which government governs our country? Elected government governs our country, but there are multiple levels of elected government. So what are the different levels of government? When I say multiple levels of elected government, very good. At the state level, there are state government. At the center, there is a central government. So that you are answering multiple questions. Therefore, try to understand, first of all, we should know that who is supposed to govern the people. And for that, you are given the answer, the government is supposed to govern the people. But now if I ask a question, how that government is formed, whether the government should be elected, whether the government should be a nominated authority, whether the government should be a dictatorship type of authority. So the first question is, who will govern our country? The government. But the next question is how the government will come to that particular place or position. You said that it has to be elected. Now, how do you answer all these questions? That the government has to govern our country, the government has to be elected. How do you know the answers to all these things? The answers to all those things come from the Constitution of India. Maybe you have not read the Constitution, but maybe you heard about all those things already. Therefore, who is going to give us all these information as to how the country is to be governed? It is the Constitution of India. So therefore, what is the Constitution of India? The Constitution is a fundamental rule book of our country that gives us the idea as to how the country is to be governed. All the rules, the major rules are laid down in the Constitution based on which our country will be governed. So it answers all these questions. Probably it answers who will govern, who will govern our country. So if you say that the country will be governed by the government, then the next question is how the government is to be established. So who will govern? The government will govern. How the government is to be established? The government is to be established by an election. So somebody answered me, it has to be through election. So the question is who will conduct the election for this particular government? So can you answer this question? Who will conduct the election? Who will conduct the election? It will be done by the Election Commission of India. Very good. So the election will be conducted by Election Commission of India. How do you know that the election will be conducted by the Election Commission of India? That is again given in the Constitution. Now the most important thing is, okay, the government is elected, which is based on an election which is conducted with the Election Commission of India. What will be the powers of this particular government? What will be the functions of this particular government? That means to what extent the powers and functions can be exercised by this particular government. What are the powers and functions of the government? What can be done by the government? What cannot be done by the government? So all these informations are given in the Constitution. But do you think that the government is the only authority in our country? The government is the only authority based on which our country is governed, or the government is the only organ under our Constitution? Say, if you take the human body does have multiple organs. Can you give me examples of some of the organs in the human body? Some important organs. Very good. Brain is an important organ. Then, okay, your eyes. Then, lungs. Very good. Kidney, heart. So, liver. So, some of small intestine, probably large intestine. So, these are all some of the important organs. But do you think that without these organs, though that the brain is the most important organ, do you think that the human body can just function only with your brain when the other organs are not working? Therefore, similarly, if a country is to function, there are multiple organs. Though one of the important organ is the government. When you say that who is supposed to govern, it is definitely the government. The government has to govern the people. But the government alone will not be able to govern such a large country. There are other multiple organs under the Constitution, at least some of the major important organs. So, who gives us idea as to what are the other organs in our country? That is again given in the Constitution. So, for example, in addition to the government, at least there are two other important organs under the Constitution. One is the government, and then you have what is called as the legislature, and then you have what is called as the judiciary. So, how do we know that there are other organs? The government is also what is called as the executive. Have you ever heard of the word executive? The government is called as the executive. The parliament, have you heard of the word parliament? And the state legislature, they are called as legislature. They are the legislative body. And then you have what is called as judiciary. Judiciary, nothing but the courts. So therefore, in addition to the executive, that is the government, there are other organs in our country, that is the legislature as well as what is called as the judiciary. But in addition to these organs, there can be multiple independent bodies. Some independent bodies are also there. So in the Constitution, there are three major organs. What are those three major organs? The legislature, the executive and judiciary. And apart from that, there are certain independent bodies. Independent bodies means these are independent of all the three organs of the state. Can you give me examples of independent bodies? So for example, Election Commission of India is an independent body. Say for example, the Union Public Service Commission. Have you heard of the Union Public Service Commission? Which is basically what is called as UPSC. What is the role of UPSC? UPSC is basically the body which will conduct the examination that you are preparing for. That's an independent body under the Constitution. Therefore, for a large country to function, we necessarily not only require a government. The government is just one of the organ in the country. In addition to the government, we also need to have what is called as legislature. And in addition to that, we also need judiciary. In addition to all the three things, we also need to have what is called as other independent bodies. But how do we know as to what are the powers and functions? What are they supposed to do? What are they not supposed to do? This is all provided in the fundamental rule book of our country. And what is that fundamental rule book? That is the Constitution of India. Is that clear? Okay, so try to understand what the Constitution. The Constitution is nothing but the fundamental rule book of our country, based on which the country is to be governed. So if you first further look into this particular fundamental rule book, it tells us who will govern the people, how the government will be how the government is formed, and the answer to that it is elected. Then the next question is, When I say that the government will be elected, maybe the next question is who will have the right to vote and elect the government? So you'll have to understand from where the answer comes, again from the constitution. The people will have the right to vote. And in fact, the constitution gives a power to all the people to vote in the elections. That is what is basically what is called as universal adult suffrage or universal adult franchise. That means every adult individual will have the right to vote. Where that comes from? From the constitution. Okay, people vote, elect the government. But however, somebody has to conduct the election in an organized manner. Who will conduct the election? The Election Commission of India. And then once the government is formed, the government has to deliver some services to the people. So to that extent, what are the powers and functions of the government? In addition to the government, which is basically called as an executive organ, there are other multiple organs like the legislature and the judiciary. And in addition to them, there are independent bodies as well. So all these information comes from where? They come from the fundamental rule book of our country, that is the constitution. Now the most important thing is, suppose let us assume that the government is formed. The government is a very powerful authority because the government is conferred a lot of powers by the Constitution of India. The rule book is giving the power to the government. Now, this government can also become arbitrary. What do you mean by arbitrary in nature? Because the government is too powerful, the government may sometimes function arbitrarily. Arbitrarily means as per their whims and fancies, as per their wish. Because the government is a very powerful body. Now, therefore, it is also mandatory under the constitution, though a government will be there, but this government is established under the constitution to ensure only what is called as a welfare state, to ensure what is only called as to govern the people properly. The government is not to function in an arbitrary manner. Therefore, the powers of the government shall also be restricted. And who is authority to restrict the powers of the government? It is the constitution again. Now try to understand, the constitution is not only giving the power to the government, but also it will place restriction upon the powers of the government. So therefore, the government does not function arbitrarily. And can you give me an example as to what are the provision in the constitution that can restrict the powers of the government? Very good. The fundamental rights. So therefore, the constitution is also a source of our fundamental rights. And what is the purpose of giving these fundamental rights? Is to restrict the powers of the government. Is that clear to all of you? So when I talk of the constitution gives multiple information because this is a fundamental rule book and it is broadly based on the rules that is given in the constitution. The country is governed. This rules tells us how the government has to be formed. This rules tells us what is the powers of the government. This rule tells us what are the other organs. This rule tells us what are the functions that they are supposed to do and not supposed to do. And if they arbitrarily function, what are the ways by which the government can be made accountable? And to that extent, the rules also provide certain fundamental rights to the people of this particular country. And these fundamental rights cannot be taken away even by the government. That is not possible. So all these information is given in one rule book, and that rule book is basically what is called as the fundamental rule book. Is it clear? And that is nothing but the Constitution of India. So to put it in a very simple way, if at all you'll have to define what is a constitution. A constitution is a fundamental rule book of our country based on which the country is to be governed. Is that clear? That is basically what is called as constitution. All right, so I have explained briefly as to what is a constitution. As we'll proceed, you'll understand more about the constitution. This is the broader idea that you should have as to what is a constitution. Now, the next thing that I wanted to bring to you is, okay, we understood as to what is a constitution. And we defined that the constitution is nothing but the fundamental rule book of our country. I could have just said it is a rule book of our country, but I did not say it is a rule book of our country. I said it is a fundamental rule book of our country. Does it mean that we have other rules apart from what is there in the constitution, which is also the basis on which our country is governed? Or is it only one rule book that we have in our country is the constitution? Or do we have multiple rules to govern our country apart from the constitution? Just think about it. I use the word fundamental rule book. So fundamental rule book means it is one of the most important rule book to govern our country. Does it mean that we'll have other rules to govern our country apart from the constitution? So, for example, in the beginning of the class, I asked you an example that whenever you violate the traffic rules, the traffic police authority is empowered to put some fine upon you. He may take some action, put some fine upon you. Therefore, tell me that the traffic authority is empowered to put some fine upon you is based on the power that is conferred upon him by the constitution. Do you think that the constitution directly confers this power upon the traffic police authorities to impose fine upon the people when they violate the traffic rules? What do you think? Is it true or not? Does the constitution give them the authority directly? The constitution does not give them the authority directly. Now, this is a very simple matter to be dealt with regard to governing a big country like India. So, therefore, not everything is told only by the constitution. Now, try to understand, apart from the constitution, there are thousands of rule books, or I would say there are thousands of rules. Let us assume the constitution provides for certain rules. Outside the constitution, there are thousands of rules which are also used to govern our country. But however, of all the rules, which is a fundamental rule book? The constitution is a fundamental rule book. The constitution deals with certain rules, the way as to how the country is to be governed. These are the most fundamental rules. But these are not the only rules based on which the country is governed. Beyond the constitution, there are a number of rules based on which the country is governed, but all those rules are subordinated to the rules in the constitution. That means who is at the priority, who is at the top? The fundamental rules that is given in the constitution. For that matter, you will have to understand that apart from the constitution, there are also a lot of ordinary laws in our country. The constitution is the fundamental rule book, and whatever there in the constitution, you can consider that to be what is called as constitutional laws. Whatever the provisions in the constitution, the interpretation of those provisions, they're all considered to be constitutional law. That is a law, but that's a constitutional law. But outside the scope of constitution, we also have what is called as ordinary laws. These ordinary laws are also used to govern our country. But between the constitutional law, which is the fundamental law, and the ordinary law, which is more supreme? The constitutional law is more supreme. The constitution is more supreme. So therefore, it is a rule book, but outside the constitution, there are also a lot of other rules or other laws. When I use the word rule, it can also be equivalent to the word of what is called as laws. Basically, it is a law, but to make you understand very easily, I'm using the word rule. All right. So apart from the constitution, there is also what is called as laws outside the constitution, but those are all considered to be what is called as ordinary laws. Now, can you give me an example of ordinary laws? Now, these are not directly in the constitution. Okay, before you give me an example of ordinary laws, please tell me who can make ordinary laws in our country. Who is authority to make the ordinary laws? The parliament can make the ordinary law, and the state legislature can also make the ordinary laws. Have you ever heard of the word parliament? What constitutes a parliament in our country? For the students who may not have the idea, we will see these things also elaborately at the later stages. As and when we proceed, will be fine, but just a basic idea. The parliament comprises of two houses, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. In fact, the parliament includes the president also, but for time being, you understand it consists of the Lok Sabha as well as the Rajya Sabha. Similarly, in the states, what are the houses which is part of the state legislature? In the states, what are the houses? Okay, Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad. But not mandatorily that most of the states will have two houses. The English of translation of that is what is called as Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council. Not necessarily every state have a Legislative Council, but what is mandatory is Legislative Assembly. Now try to understand, when I talk of ordinary laws, these are nothing but laws made by the parliament and state legislature. These are laws made by the Parliament and state legislature. That's basically what is called as an ordinary law. So what is an ordinary law? These are all laws made by the Parliament and the state legislature. These are all laws made by the Parliament and the state legislature. That's basically what is called as an ordinary law. Laws made by the Parliament and state legislature. Now the question is, we have seen that the Constitution is what? The Constitution is a fundamental rule book. And the Constitution allows for multiple organs. What are the organs? Like the executive, the legislature and judiciary. And this Parliament and legislature is nothing but, state legislature is nothing but, that is a legislative organ. Now, therefore, who is giving the authority to make the ordinary laws to this Parliament and the state legislature? It is a Constitution which is giving them the power. So the Constitution gives further power to the legislature, that is the Parliament and the state legislature, to make further ordinary laws. So can you give me examples of some ordinary laws which is not there in the Constitution? Have you ever heard of any laws that is made by the Parliament? Very good. Who said BNS? Very good. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Act. That's an ordinary law. That is not there in the Constitution. But who is making this law? The Parliament made. But who gave the power to the Parliament to make this law in the first place? The Constitution. So similarly, can you give me any of the other ordinary laws? Yes, BNS is one example. Some example if you have to take BNS is, any other example that you can give? Any ordinary laws apart from BNS? You might have heard something here and there. Just think about it. At least I need 5 laws, then only I am going to move forward. Yes? Bharatiya? Okay, so that those 2-3 laws, like anyways of similar form. I want it in different nature of laws. Huh? Very good. Right to Information Act. How many of you heard about this Right to Information Act? Okay, very good. RTI. Right to Information Act. RTI Act. Any other act? What is the act? Act. I'm not looking for the commissions. I'm not looking for the bodies. Act. Law. There are certain laws which establishes these bodies. Oh, I do understand. So there should be a law which establishes the National Human Rights Commission. So what is that act? I'm looking for that particular act. I'm looking for that particular law. The law that you are referring to is Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act establishes the National Human Rights Commission. Anyways, Human Rights Act is an ordinary law. Okay, any other examples? Right to Education Act. Have you heard of this? Right to Education Act. The traffic police and all those things I talked about. And from which law do you think that they are getting the right to do all those things? There is an act which is called as a Motor Vehicle Act. Have you ever heard of this act? Motor Vehicle Act. It is a Motor Vehicle Act which is passed by the Parliament that confers authority upon what is called as the traffic police to impose fine when the rules are violated. Consumer Protection Act is there. As a consumer, whenever you purchase certain products, and if there is a substandard service or a product that is given to you, you can go to the consumer court based on what is called as a Consumer Protection Act. In this way, there are thousands of laws in our country. We are just talking about 4-5 laws, but there are thousands of laws in our country. But all those laws which is made by the Parliament or by the state legislature, they are only considered to be what is called as ordinary laws. That these ordinary laws has been made over a period of time. But what is the source of all these things? It is a constitution. It is a constitution that is giving the power to the legislature to make these ordinary laws. But the constitution itself is not directly mentioning all these rules, because the constitution cannot be so big to do all those things. But the constitution contains only the fundamental rules. And apart from the fundamental rules, the other rules can be made by the legislature. But who confers this power upon the legislative bodies to do all those things? It is the Constitution of India. Is that clear to all of you? So try to understand this, that the Constitution is not the only rule book. We have other rule books as well. But who is supreme of all the rules, of all the rule books? It is the Indian Constitution. Is that clear to all of you? But to govern India, we need to have some fundamental rules. Only those fundamental rules are given in the Constitution. And apart from that, the Constitution empowers the legislature to make the other rules or the other laws but they are all considered to be only what is called as ordinary laws. Is that clear? So this is the first understanding you should have before I proceed further to the next topic, is that I wanted you to understand the topic of what is called as state. State as in, I wanted you to know the political science definition of state. A state in political science need to fulfill certain characteristics, and what are those characteristics to consider or call something as what is called as a state. Don't confuse when I use the word state always to a state government or a state in our country. I'm talking about the political science definition of what is called as a state. That is a nation state. So therefore, what are the key things to fall within the definition of state? It has to involve all these things. First of all, it should have what is called as people. So any state should have what is called as its own set of people. Not only it should have its own set of people, it should have its own set of territory. Now, once I say all those things, you see that India can be considered to be a state as per this particular definition. It should have people, own people, it should have its own territory. It should have a government of its own. Any form of government of its own. It should have an established government. And then the state should be a sovereign authority. It should be a sovereign authority, that means supreme authority, which means all the internal matters and in fact even the external matters related to the particular state, who is authority to decide? The state is authority to decide itself. It is not dictated by others. So when these features are satisfied, then you can consider that falls within the political science definition of what is called as state. Do you think that India can be considered to be a state? Does it have its own people? Does it have its own citizens? Does it have its own territory? Do you have a territory for our country? Yes or no? So if I say that, how do we know what is the territory of India? So from where we'll understand as to what is the territory of India. When you all say that yes, India as a state has its own territory, but from where do you understand as to what is the territory of India? From the constitution, very good. Because which is a fundamental rule book of our country? The constitution. It is a constitution which gives us as to what is the territory of India. But if I ask furthermore, where specifically in the Indian constitution the territory of India is mentioned? Where is it mentioned? Where is it specifically mentioned in the Constitution of India? Part 1. Okay, but more specifically, under Part 1. The Indian Constitution is divided into a number of parts. Today we have 25 parts in the Constitution. I don't expect some fresher to know all these 25 parts. So, but where specifically, if you know? Article? It is not an Article 5. The very first article of the Indian Constitution talks about this. India, that is Bharat, shall be union of states. Don't worry about that. But the territory of India is not explicitly mentioned in Schedule 1, sorry, Article 1. Although Article 1 talks about the territory of India and all those things. But where specifically do you think that the territory of India is mentioned? It is mentioned in the Schedule 1 of the Indian Constitution. I do not know how many students have got this basic idea. If you do not have a background in polity, sometimes you may not know. So nothing to be think that you're not having the idea. If you see the Indian Constitution has got certain articles. It has got certain parts. Parts are the larger classification. Then you have articles. And there are also certain schedules in the Constitution. So if you look into the schedules, and where exactly the territory of India is mentioned, it is mentioned in the Schedule 1 of the Constitution. Just keep it as a factual information. Later we'll discuss about all those things. But the point now you have to understand is that India has its own citizens. India has a territory that is given in the Constitution of India. Does India have a government of its own? Yes, we do have an elected government. We do have a democratic government at the national level, at the state level. So we do have elected governments as well. So we do have a government. Does India as a state, is it a sovereign state? What do you mean by a sovereign state? A state is considered to be a sovereign state when it is not dictated terms by the other state. Do you think that other states, say for example United States of America, or for that matter say let us assume United Kingdom, which once colonized India, do you think that they can dictate terms to India as to what India has to do or should not do? That is not possible. India will have its own policy, be it both internal as well as external policies. Therefore, the state is a sovereign state. Now, whenever these things are satisfied, you can consider that to be what is called as a definition of state. But although whenever I use the word state, it does not necessarily mean that this is what is the thing. You'll have to see in which context I'm using the word state. That is why I said that this is in the context of the political science definition of state, but not necessarily that I will use the word in the context of the political science. Okay. So this is the definition. Why I'm saying this is once UPSC is asked this, what does it mean by state as per political science? So therefore, when it satisfies all these things, then it is considered to be what is called as state. Okay, so before I proceed further, we have understood as to what is a constitution. So what is a constitution? It is a fundamental rule book of our country based on which the country is governed. So that we have understood broadly. Now the next thing is, if I say this particular statement, just think about this particular statement. That not necessarily every country which has got a constitution, you can say that there is constitutionalism. So this is a statement that I'm giving. So to understand and analyze this particular statement, you should have meaning of two things. One is what is called as a constitution, and other is what is called as constitutionalism. I'm saying that it is not necessary that every country which has got a constitution will also have what is called as constitutionalism. So therefore, we'll have to understand as to what is called as constitutionalism. So what is constitutionalism? Can anyone tell me what does it mean by constitutionalism? Very good. Upholding the principles of the constitution, then you can say there is basically what is called as constitutionalism. Very good. Can you tell me upholding the principle of constitution means what? Strictly following the constitution. Okay. So say for example, when do you say that we are strictly following the constitution? Say for example, let us assume under the constitution, the people are having rights. Do we have fundamental rights? Yes, we are having fundamental rights. Now, I'm just asking the question, you just think about it. Suppose let us assume that tomorrow the state is arbitrarily arresting the citizens. When I say state, the police is an arms of the government, and the police is arbitrarily arresting the citizens. And when the police are arbitrarily arresting the citizens, do the citizens have any remedy against that? Suppose tomorrow you think that you have not done any mistake and you are arrested by the police. And when I say arbitrarily arrested by the police, let us assume the police arrest you, the police is not even telling you the reason as to why they have arrested the individual. And you are also not produced in front of the magistrate, in front of the court. And you are kept in the police station itself, say for let us assume 10 days. Do you think that this action of the police, which is representing the state or the government, do you think that this action of the police is arbitrary? Is it arbitrary? Why do you say it is arbitrary? Why not the police should not arrest you? Okay, very good. First, you are entitled to know the reason. Very good. Hmm. Very good. Very good. Very good. So, in fact, if you look into the Constitution of India, the Constitution gives us these things as our fundamental right. And what are the fundamental rights? To put it in a very simple way, it is not that the police cannot arrest us, but when the police arrest any citizen for that particular matter, that first of all, the person has to be informed of the grounds of arrest at the time of arrest. Then only you will know for what reason you are arrested. Only when you know, you can defend yourself. Whether you have done it or not done it, anyways, you have the right to defend yourself. So first of all, you should be informed of the grounds of arrest. Second is, after informing of the grounds of arrest, it is mandatory under the constitution, you should be produced before the nearest magistrate. That means the nearest court or the magistrate which has got the jurisdiction. When I say magistrate, judicial magistrate, within a period of 24 hours. Within 24 hours, you have to produce there. You cannot be kept in the police station for a long time. You cannot be held up in the lockup itself. And if these things are not done, that amount to violation of your fundamental right. All right. This is what the constitution says. The fundamental rule book itself says. But suppose though this is there, but it is not followed. It is there in the constitution theoretically, but in practical it is not happening. Then you say that there is no constitutionalism. Now, when do you say that there is constitutionalism? Only when the constitution is implemented in letter and spirit. Only when the principles of the constitutions are followed in spirit. In practicality, if the constitution gives a right, then it is also followed in reality, then you can say that there is constitutionalism. Therefore, try to understand, having a constitution in itself may not ensure what is called as constitutionalism. When do you think that there can be constitutionalism? The constitutionalism can be there only when that the constitution is followed and implemented in letter and spirit. That is why there are certain countries, they may have a constitution, but there is no constitutionalism. In India, we do not have that particular problem. In India, we do have a constitution and there is a constitutionalism also, because we have a very strong tradition and we have a very strong constitution and we have a very strong government, we have very strong people, we have very strong judiciary and all those things. So that is not an issue, but there are few countries which may have a constitution, but sometimes the constitution is not implemented in letter and spirit. Those countries are usually what is called as banana republics. Have you ever heard of this? Banana republics, have you ever heard of this particular term? Banana republics in theory, they are called as republics. Like they do have a written constitution, they are republic, but they do not have very strong foundation. What happens to a banana tree? It does not have a very strong foundation. A banana tree is not very strong, the roots are not very strong, and it can be shaken easily. So such republics are usually what is called as banana republics, where they may have a constitution, but they do not have what is called as constitutionalism. So in the political science, or in the view of political science, what is important is not just having a constitution, but also what is important is that there should be what is called as constitutionalism. Is that clear? So I hope you have understood as to what is a constitution. You would have understood what is a state in terms of political science definition. And also you should, by this time, should understand what is called as constitutionalism. Now try to understand, constitutionalism is not just having a constitution, but also implementing the constitution in what is called as letter and spirit. Therefore, in any constitution or any country which has a constitution, and when you say that there is also constitutionalism, this constitutionalism is adhering to the principles in the constitution, and every constitution for that particular matter, a democratic constitution especially, will restrict the powers of the state. What is one of the important objective of the constitution? It is not only to give power to the state, it is not only to give power to the government, but also to restrict the powers of the government. Do you not think restricting the powers of the government is very important in the constitution? Why it becomes very important? It becomes very important, otherwise they will turn to be arbitrary, because they are so powerful. If their power is not restricted, this may exactly happen. They can arrest anyone tomorrow without producing them before the magistrate. Therefore, one of the important reason behind constitutionalism, or one of the important idea behind constitutionalism, is to what is called as limit the powers of the state. If there is a limitation upon the powers of the state and that is followed, then you can say that there is what is called as constitutionalism. All right. Now just come to the have a look into this particular question. This was asked one of the years in the UPSC examination. Just go through this particular question. Try to answer this question. What does it mean by a constitutional government? That's the question. What does it mean by a constitutional government? A constitutional government means a government which is limited by the terms of the constitution. Is it clear? So that means basically there should be limitation upon the powers of whom? Limitation upon the powers of the government. Then you can say that it is a constitutional government. Or in other words, the broader philosophy is that the constitution has to be implemented in letter and spirit. And in letter and spirit, there is limitation upon the powers of the government. So then you can say that there is what is called as constitutionalism. Have a look into the second question. Try to solve the second question as well. Online students also please go through it. Let me see who can tell me the answer and the reason for that. So here they are trying to understand which one of the following best defines the term state. That's political definition of state. Not visible. Is it because of this? Is it okay now? Okay, just go through it. A, someone A, anybody else? What is B option? A, B. What about C and D? Which one of the following best defines the term state? Which one of the following best defines the term state? Statement A community of persons permanently occupying a definite territory, independent of external control and possessing an organized government. How many of you think it is A? Okay, so is there anyone who thinks B? A politically organized people of a definite territory and possessing an authority to govern them, maintain law and order, protect their natural rights, and safeguard their means of sustenance. See a large number of persons who have been living in a definite territory for a long time with own culture, tradition, and government. So, if you see this particular C, I can easily rule out this particular C because it is nowhere talking about what is called as sovereignty. Okay, so there's no sovereign authority there. It is only talking about number of persons living in a definite territory for a very long time with their own culture, tradition, and government. So it is not a sovereign authority. Nowhere it is mentioning about the sovereign authority. Eliminate this. A society permanently living in a definite territory with a central authority. Okay, we can consider this probably the central authority to be the government, and an executive responsible for the central authority, and an independent judiciary. But it is not talking about what? Again, not talking about the sovereign authority. So again, it is not very clear. So okay. Okay, now come to B. A politically organized people. You have organized people that is there. A definite territory is there, possessing an authority to govern them. So a government is also there. Maintain law and order, protect their natural rights, safeguard their means of sustenance. Again, which is not very clear here. Sovereign authority is not clear. But you come to option A. A community of persons. So we do have a group of people, a community of persons permanently occupying a definite territory, independent of external control. What does this mean? It means it is a sovereign authority. and also possessing an organized government and independent of external control. So therefore, which would be the most appropriate answer here? Answer A is the most appropriate answer. Is that clear? So this is how UPSC may ask you the questions. Where it is talking about a sovereign government.
So will this also be considered the part of state? Because there can be government.
They are not going to give you two options. If they are giving the option B like that, then there will be a change in option A. They cannot give the option A in the same manner and also the option B in the same manner.
Order or natural right which they will safeguard, it will still be considered state, right? If it has sold.
Yes, it is all implied. They see it is only that when they talk about it is providing law and order and all those things, whether they mention it or they do not mention it, when you talk of what is called as a sovereign state and when you talk of a proper established government and that government is supposed to provide all those things, it's very much implicit even if they do not provide it. But the point is, it is not that they are going to sovereign here also to confuse you. So that is not likely to happen. And what you are asking is very much implied already. All right. All right. So please come to the next topic. We'll just move forward. That is written and unwritten constitution. So have you all understood as to what is a constitution? So before we proceed further and understand some of the basics of the constitution, let us try to understand the difference between what is called as a written and an unwritten constitution. If you see countries across the world, wherever there is a constitution, these constitutions are broadly classified into what is called as a written constitution and what is called as an unwritten constitution. Say for example, in India, we have what type of constitution? We have a written constitution. In USA, what type of constitution? It's again a written constitution. In fact, it is one of the first written constitution in the world. It is the first written constitution, and India is the lengthiest known written constitution. We are all both written constitution, but not necessarily. All the countries across the world do have what is called as a written constitution. There are countries which also have what is called as unwritten constitution. So basically, what is the difference between what is called as a written and an unwritten constitution? So the basic fundamental difference between a written and an unwritten constitution is basically the written constitutions are codified in nature and the unwritten constitutions are uncodified in nature. So what does it mean by codified and uncodified? So when I talk of unwritten constitution, for written constitution, I give the example of Constitution of USA, the Indian Constitution. So these are all examples of what is called as the written constitutions. So these are all examples of what is called as the written constitution. So if you talk of the unwritten constitution, the Constitution of United Kingdom, the Constitution of Israel. So these are all what is called as examples of unwritten constitution. So what basically is the difference between a written and an unwritten constitution is that a written constitution is codified and an unwritten constitution is uncodified. Now what is the difference between codified and uncodified? Codified means made in a structured manner. What does it mean by uncodified? There's no structure to that in an uncodified constitution. In different forms. Very good. Or can we say that codified means it is written down, probably into a single document, let us assume. And uncodified means it is not written down. Is that true? Can we say like that? Codified means written down and uncodified means not written down. Codified means written down probably into a single document. Okay, we'll just come to that. But what about the Indian Constitution? Is it codified or uncodified? Codified. And codified means it is all written down. And in case of India, it is written down into a single document. That means when you talk of constitution, we know that there's only one document. And in that document, the fundamental rules are written down. So therefore, it is what is called as a codified constitution. So codified constitution normally means what? That it is normally written down into one single document. It can be more than one document also, but mostly into one single document. That's basically what is called as codified. So codified basically means it is written down into single document, probably for easy understanding. But this is not necessarily always single document. What does it mean by uncodified then for that particular matter? Uncodified, as the name suggests, is it written down or not written down? So that is exactly what you'll have to understand. Unwritten constitution necessarily does not mean that it is not written down. It is also written down, but it is not written down in one single place. And that's basically what is called as an unwritten constitution. Do not have a misunderstanding that an unwritten constitution is not written down. It may be codified, it may be written down, but it may not be written down in one single place. That's basically what is called as an unwritten constitution. Say, for example, in case of India, what is the constitution? The constitution is just one single document and everything is written down in that particular constitution only. But whereas in UK, there is no one single document which is called as a constitution. The Constitution of United Kingdom contains all the ordinary laws. In case of UK, when you say it is uncodified, it consists of all the ordinary laws. I'm just taking the example of UK. So what are all the things that is part of their constitution? When I say all the ordinary laws, I have already told you what is ordinary law. What is ordinary law? All the laws that is made by their legislature. That is all the laws made by the Parliament of United Kingdom. That is part of their constitution. Then not only all the ordinary laws made by the Parliament of United Kingdom, all the conventional practice that they have been following, all their conventions. What do you mean by conventions? Conventions are usually long-standing traditions. Long-standing tradition means for centuries they may be following that particular tradition. Long-standing traditions. And in fact, you know which is the oldest constitution in the world? Which is the oldest constitution in the world? It is the Constitution of United Kingdom, not the United States of America. When I talk of the oldest written constitution, that is United States of America. When I just ask which is the oldest constitution, that is United Kingdom. Do you know what is the constitutional history of United Kingdom? The constitutional history of United Kingdom dates back to 13th century. The Constitution of USA dates back only to 18th century. That means almost 500 to 600 years. The Constitution of United Kingdom is much older, though it is an unwritten constitution. They have a very long history of having a constitution, and many of their constitution or whatever is there in their constitution even today includes a lot of conventional practices, traditionally what they have been following. It also includes what is called as the judicial precedents, judicial judgments and precedents. Etc. So all these things will be part of what is their constitution. Therefore, what is an unwritten constitution? An unwritten constitution is just nothing like a particular document is there which contains the provisions of the constitution. It can be ordinary laws also, it can be conventional practices also, it can be what is called as the judicial decisions also. Everything is actually part of their constitution. Therefore, it is not codified in one single place. And such a constitution is what is called as an unwritten constitution. Is that clear? So India is an example of written constitution, whereas UK is an example of what is called as an unwritten constitution. Written constitutions are usually codified into one single document, whereas unwritten constitutions are not codified into one single document. And the source of their constitution itself can be from multiple sources. It can be ordinary laws, it can be conventional practices, it can be judicial judgments and precedents. So all those things collectively will make up the constitution of that particular country. And the next important difference between a written and an unwritten constitution is the general rule is the written constitutions are rigid in character. and the unwritten constitutions are flexible in character. What does it mean by rigid and flexible here? I'm only trying to mean when I say that the written constitutions are rigid in character, to the extent that if at all you will have to make any changes to a written constitution, can the constitution be changed? Yes, and that's basically the technical word is what is called as amendment. So instead of using the word change, I may use the word amendment also. Amendment means basically changes to the existing constitution. Usually making changes to the written constitution are possible, but that is not easy. And to the extent you'll have to understand that making changes to the written constitution is extremely difficult. So therefore, there is an element of what is called as rigidity. It is so rigid to make those changes, and that's basically one thing that you'll have to keep in your mind. So it is rigid in nature, whereas an unwritten constitution is flexible in nature. A written constitution is rigid, whereas an unwritten constitution is flexible. Here it is rigid, here it is what is called as flexible. That means making changes to the written constitutions are possible, but what is the way that you can make the changes are little difficult. The procedure that is followed to make changes is difficult. But whereas in an unwritten constitution, you can make the changes, but the process is relatively easier. Do not ask me what is the process and all those things. We cannot understand everything in one single class. But as of now, try to understand. The process is easier to make changes in which constitution? In an unwritten constitution. Where the process is difficult? In a written constitution. This is a general rule. Okay, so generally this is the case. And then most importantly, there are the other important difference that I have to bring. But most importantly, if you see, if you talk of a written constitution, how did we understand a written constitution? A written constitution is something which is codified into a single document. So normally when you talk of a written constitution, which usually consists of one single document, normally the history of that particular constitution, you will see there was a moment that this constitution was enacted. So for example, is there a date when the Indian constitution was enacted and when it came into force? So can you tell me that what was the date it was enacted and then when it came into force? Yes. And when did it come into force? Very good. 26th of January 1949. It was enacted on 26th of November 1949, but it came into force on 26th January 1950. Therefore, there was a specific day on which it came into force. And when I say there was a specific date on which it came into force, it also means that you'll have to understand that this constitution, usually the written constitution that I'm talking about, that written constitution was usually drafted by a specific body. A specific body was there, and that body usually drafted the constitution. They wrote down the constitution, and formally it was accepted as a constitution by that particular body. And what is the body in case of India? That drafted the Indian constitution and finally adopted and gave force to the Indian constitution. Very good. It is a constituent assembly. Therefore, you will see in the history that most of the written constitution do have what is called as a constituent assembly that actually drafted them and gave force to this particular constitution. But whereas no such body may be there in case of what is called as an unwritten constitution, because in an unwritten constitution, never ever they had one single document. It has evolved over a period of time. Whatever laws that they made, whatever judgment that was given, whatever conventional practices were there, everything become part of their constitution. So try to understand the differences. First, it is codified, that is written down. It is not written down into one single place. Second, mostly the written constitutions are rigid, the unwritten constitutions are flexible. Normally, with regard to a written constitution, that there used to be a specific body similar to that of the Constituent Assembly, which may not be the case in an unwritten constitution. And most importantly, the difference between a written and an unwritten constitution is that in a written constitution, there exists a distinction between what is called as a constitutional law and an ordinary law. Is there a distinction between constitutional law and ordinary law? So, for example, what did I say that it is a constitutional law? there exists a distinction between what is called as a constitutional law and ordinary law. What is a constitutional law? Basically the provisions in the constitution and the interpretations of those provisions. They're all considered to be what is called as the constitutional law. But what is an ordinary law? These are all laws which are outside the scope of the constitution. These are all which are made by the parliament. Do you have a distinction of a constitutional law and an ordinary law in our country? In India? Do you have constitutional law and do you have ordinary laws? What are all the ordinary laws in our country? Right to education, we have seen the BNS that you told me, the RT Act, these are all ordinary laws. But what about the fundamental rights probably and the interpretation of the provisions? These are all constitutional laws. So there do exist a difference between what is called as constitutional law and what is called as an ordinary law. But whereas that distinction does not exist in what is called as an unwritten constitution. In unwritten constitution, there is no such distinction. No distinction in an unwritten constitution. Why? There is no distinction as to constitutional law and an ordinary law because the constitution itself consists of everything. The ordinary law is also part of their constitution. The judgments is also part of their constitution. The convention is also part of their constitution. Therefore, there is no distinction between what is called as a constitutional law and what is called as an ordinary law. Whatever is the law there, everything is part of their constitution. But in India, whatever is the law is not everything part of the constitution. Only those provisions in the constitution or the constitution, outside those things, everything is ordinary law. Is that clear? So these are the distinction between what is called as a written and an unwritten constitution. Is that clear to all of you? So please take down a question. These are all very basic questions. Try to start write answer to those basic questions. Some simple questions. But try to understand. Now UPSC is not going to ask you these questions in your mains examination. But just for your writing practice, I am giving these questions. Okay, just to make sure that you are starting to write. These are all like, let us assume if UPSC standard, this is like a 10 standard, whatever I am giving. But you should start writing and then only probably you will come to the further standard. So please take down this question. Differentiate between a written and an unwritten constitution. Differentiate between a written and an unwritten constitution. 5 marks. You can write it for 100 words. Either you can write it in paragraphs or you can put a tabular column, differentiate, whatever way that you want, you can write it. So normally how you will write it? First you write one small 1 or 2 lines like an introduction. So here what could be an introduction? You can generally define as to what is a constitution. And then you can say that the constitution can be further divided into written and an unwritten constitution. Then for one paragraph you can write written, then unwritten, then you can conclude. Or probably you can put a tabular column, divide between a written and an unwritten constitution. And then write one line for your conclusion. Okay, so whatever you feel like, just write it. Okay, so just write it, then only you will improve it over a period of time. Okay, so come to the next topic. This is very important, salient features of the constitution. So we'll try to understand some of the salient features of the Indian constitution before even we get into the constitution. So this itself will take me 2-3 classes. First salient features, then we'll get into what is called as the some of the key terms in the polity. So only after doing all those things, I'll go to the preamble to the Constitution of India. So write down the salient features of the Indian Constitution. The first thing is what is called as democracy. Now, what do you understand by the word democracy? Let me know what you understand by the word democracy. Very good. So, can we say democracy is a form of government which is elected by the people? Very good. Or in other words, we can say it is a government for the people, by the people and of the people. So who is electing the government? The government is elected by the people, and for whom the people, the government has to work for the people. And who can even bring this government down? It is by the people. So every authority in a democratic form of government is with the people. So just write down one line. It is a form of government. It's a form of government. It's a form of government which enjoys the legitimacy as long as it enjoys the support of the people. As long as it enjoys support of the people. As long as it exercises and enjoys the support of the people. In simple words, write down, in simple words, democracy means ruled by people. In simple words, democracy means ruled by people. Listen to me, please. But if you see democracy across the world, or democracy can be further divided to what is called as direct democracy and what is called as indirect democracy. When I say that it is ruled by people, it can be directly ruled by people or it can be indirectly ruled by people. So it can be divided to direct and indirect democracy. Today, if you see in the modern world, the scope of direct democracy is very, very minimal. In fact, almost we can say it is negligible, that the scope of direct democracy, because of the complexity of the government. But largely today, most of the democratic countries across the world, they follow what is called as indirect democracy. Now, this indirect democracy is also what is called as representative democracy. This indirect democracy is also called as representative democracy. So what do you mean by indirect democracy or representative democracy? I said, what is democracy? Democracy generally means ruled by people. But then the question is, do you think that the people directly rule? Do the people directly run the government? Democracy means it's a government which is elected by the people. That is true. But do you think that the people directly run the government? Or is it that the people elect their representatives? And after electing the representatives, the people are delegating the power to the representatives on behalf of the people. The representatives are carrying out the government. So what type of government do you think that in India we have? We do have a democratic government, but you and me as a people, do we directly have something to say in the governance or in the government? Rather, what we do, we only elect our representatives. On behalf of us, the representatives will control the government or they will run the government. And such a form of government is what is called as indirect democracy or representative democracy. And who are those representatives whom we have delegated our power? Who are the representatives? The representatives are usually what is called as the members of the parliament, probably at the central level. And at the state level, the representatives are nothing but the members of the state legislature or the legislative assembly. So therefore, largely what we follow today in our country is basically what is called as a representative form of government or an indirect democracy. Anyways, I'll get into this a little further later, but you cannot just call a particular country as a democracy just because that the government is elected. And to qualify as a democracy, it has to satisfy certain criteria. At least few criteria it has to satisfy. I'll discuss about that. Then you can make an evaluation. Can we consider India as a democracy? All right. Of course, there's no doubt India is a democracy, a vibrant democracy. And India is a vibrant democracy because of the fact that it satisfies and qualifies these criteria. So one of the important criteria to qualify as a democracy is basically what is called as periodic election. Is periodic election. That means, suppose let us assume the government is elected, there is no doubt. But what if the election happens once in every 50 years? Let us assume the election happens, but how long? What is the frequency of the elections? The frequency of the election is it happens once in every 50 years. Can we consider that to be a democracy? That is not a democracy. There has to be a periodic election, because periodically the will of the people has to be exercised, based on which the government is to be formed. So, do we have a periodic elections in our country? And what is the frequency of elections in our country? Every 5 years. The election to the Lok Sabha happens when? Every 5 years. The election to the various state legislature happens when? Every 5 years. And this periodic election is mandated under the constitution itself. Okay, so do we have periodic elections? Okay, all right. Though we have periodic elections, but let us assume the election is not a free and fair election. Do you not think it is not only necessary that it is a periodic election, but the election should also be what type of elections? The election should also be free and fair elections. Do you think it is an important necessity? Now, what do you mean by free and fair elections? Free and fair elections. Periodic elections means that elections happening in regular periodicity or regular intervals. And free and fair election means that not only that the elections are happening regularly at periodic intervals, but the most important thing is that these elections happens without any malpractices. These elections provides a level playing field for every political party to contest election and to win the election. And then only you can consider that to be what is called as free and fair election. Say, let us assume for namesake the elections are happening periodically, but there is only one dominant party which will always win, and because election rules are in their favor, then that is not a free and fair elections. So therefore, the elections should happen periodically, and the election should also be free from any form of malpractices. Then only you can say that to be a free and fair elections. Now, who is supposed to ensure these two things, the periodic election as well as free and fair elections? It is the Election Commission of India, and that is why the Election Commission of India is made an independent body in the constitution itself, because I said that the constitution not only provides for three important organs in the state. What are the three important organs in the state? The legislature, the executive and the judiciary, but in addition to that, it also provides certain independent bodies. And one such important independent body is what? The Election Commission of India. Okay, so periodic election is there, free and fair election is there. And the other important feature of the democracy is also universal adult suffrage. It is universal adult suffrage. What do you understand by universal adult suffrage? That every adult individual is given the right to vote. And what is the age requirement for anyone to get voting rights in our country? He or she should have attained 18 years of age. That is irrespective of the caste, irrespective of the religion, or irrespective of any other discrimination, he or she shall have the right to vote. So, universal adult suffrage is again an important feature. So, periodic elections, free and fair elections, universal adult suffrage. So, these are all some of the essentials to consider a particular country to be what is called as democracy. Now, do you think that we have all these features in our constitution? Yes. Does the constitution provides for periodic election? Does the constitution provides for free and fair election? Yes, the constitution does provide for a free and fair election, and that's why they have given for what is called as the Election Commission of India. And finally, you have what is also called as universal adult suffrage. So these are all some of the important features of what is called as the democracy. So have you got a basic idea of what is democracy and what are the features, essential features of democracy? Now come to the next topic of what is called as parliamentary democracy. What is parliamentary democracy? So what does it mean by a parliamentary democracy? To understand as to what is parliamentary democracy, first you should have an understanding of what is democracy. I hope you got the meaning of what is democracy. What is democracy? Democracy is basically a form of government where it is elected by the people. And then we also understood that though India is a democracy, India is majorly a representative democracy, an indirect democracy. And that is what you'll understand further as to what is a parliamentary democracy. And even before going to that, we have understood some of the features of democracy. What are the features of democracy? Periodic elections, free and fair elections, universal adult suffrage, and all those things. Now let us try to understand as to what is this parliamentary democracy. And to understand this parliamentary democracy, first we'll have to understand few more things. Now in I think the mid of this particular year, I think 2025, the elections have happened to the Lok Sabha. So can anyone tell me that was which Lok Sabha election? The latest Lok Sabha elections. 18th Lok Sabha elections or 17th Lok Sabha elections or 19th or 16th. The Lok Sabha elections that happened recently. Okay, should not have any doubt that was the 18th Lok Sabha election. 18th Lok Sabha election means that after the commencement of the constitution, how many times the Lok Sabha elections have happened? 18 times the Lok Sabha elections have happened. That is why it is called as 18th Lok Sabha elections. And you have seen that one of the important features is that there should be periodic elections. So the 18th Lok Sabha elections happened. Now after the 18th Lok Sabha elections, who will conduct this election? The Election Commission. After the Election Commission will conduct the election, they will announce the result. And you know, after the EC announces the result, the Election Commission of India, when they declare the result, what will happen after this? Do you know what will happen after this? Have you ever followed the elections? Okay, what happens after the Election Commission of India declares the result? There is a winning party, okay. Let us talk about only the Lok Sabha elections. Okay, after the Lok Sabha elections, there is one party, probably the winning party. Then what happens? What will be done by the winning party? They will. Very good. So there will be there can be a single largest party, or there can be a coalition of parties, whatever it is. That coalition or the single largest party will choose a leader of that particular party or a leader of that particular coalition. Once a leader of that particular party or the leader of that particular coalition is chosen, that leader of that particular party or the leader of that particular coalition will go to the President of India to form the government and seek him to be appointed, him or her to be appointed as a Prime Minister. Is that clear? So, a leader of the largest party or the leader of coalition is formed, is selected. A leader of the party, the leader of the largest party or a coalition is usually chosen, and then the leader is usually appointed as a Prime Minister. The leader is usually appointed as a Prime Minister. And who appoints a Prime Minister? Who appoints a Prime Minister? Who? The President appoints a Prime Minister. Very good. So the leader of the largest party or the leader of the largest coalition go to the President and stake claim to what is called as form the government. And that leader will submit the list of people who are supporting him. And then the Prime Minister and that person may be appointed as a Prime Minister by the President of India. Now what happens? Now once a Prime Minister is appointed by the President, before that the President has to see that whether this person who is trying to stake claim to form the government, whether he has got the desired majority in the Lok Sabha. So even without the majority also they can appoint it. But after some time they have to prove the majority. So therefore, anybody who wanted to stake claim to form the government or to be appointed as a Prime Minister, they need to have a fixed number of majority in the Lok Sabha. And do you know what is that fixed number of majority? Before that, when the Election Commission of India announces a result, do you know how many MPs are elected to the Lok Sabha? How many MPs are elected? Any idea? For the students who may not have an idea, no issues. But if you know, you please tell me. 540 or 545 or 550 or 552? It is exactly 543. The election happens to 543 constituencies. That means across India, including all the 28 states and 8 union territories, the entire country is divided into how many Lok Sabha constituencies? 543 constituencies. That means there will be 543 MPs who will be elected to the Lok Sabha. So that means any one of them would be the leader of the largest party. Out of this 543 MPs who are elected, and then the leader will go to the president, and the president will appoint someone as a prime minister. Now tell me, for the president to appoint someone as a prime minister, that person should have a minimum number of majority of this 543. Does anyone know how much majority is required for this? 272. And 272 would be what kind of majority here? This 272 out of 543 would be a specific majority. What type of majority it is called as? It is called as, it is not a simple majority, it is an absolute majority. That is more than 50% of the total membership. So more than 50% of the total membership. See, so here total is how much? 543. More than 50% of that is usually what is called as absolute majority. Simple majority is something different. I'll let you know differently what is the difference later stages. As of now, it is nothing but the absolute majority. That is, absolute majority is always more than 50%. What is 50% here? 50% here would be 271.5. More than that is 272 when you round it off. So 272 is usually an absolute majority. That means this leader of the largest party or the largest coalition, he will go to the president and he will say that I have got minimum 272. It is not that it cannot be more than that. But minimum, how many members have to support him? Minimum 272 members. Then when he presents this list of people that these many people are supporting me, then the president will appoint the leader as the prime minister. And once the prime minister is appointed, the prime minister will recommend the names of other council of ministers. Who will recommend the names of other council of ministers? The prime minister will recommend the names of other persons to be appointed as the council of ministers to the president. Then the president will appoint the other persons as the council of ministers. Therefore, both the prime minister and the council of ministers will be appointed by only the president of India. But the prime minister is usually the leader of the largest party, and the other ministers are those whose names are recommended by the prime minister to the president. Therefore, the prime minister and the council of ministers are there. Now, try to understand parliamentary democracy. Now, the question is where these prime minister and the council of ministers comes from. They come from where? They come from what is called as, they come from the legislature. And to be very specific, they come from what is called as mostly the Lok Sabha. It's not necessarily they have to come only from the Lok Sabha, but mostly they come from where? They come from what is called as the Lok Sabha. But most importantly, it is not only that the government is formed from the Lok Sabha, but most importantly, once a prime minister is appointed and the council of ministers are appointed, it is not only at the time of formation of the government that they need to have this particular majority. And what is the strength here? 272. When I say 272, minimum out of this 543 MPs, how many MPs have to support this particular government? 272 MPs. It is not only at the time of forming the government, but also for the next 5 years, that the government shall always have a minimum support of how many MPs in the Lok Sabha? Minimum 272 MPs. And that is why it is called as parliamentary democracy. That means the parliamentary democracy should have an understanding the government is not only formed from the parliament, where the Lok Sabha is part of it, but if the government has to survive in the first place, they shall always have the support of the parliament. To be very specific, they should have the support of what? Support of minimum 272 members in the Lok Sabha. That means without the support of the parliament or without the support of the 272 members in the Lok Sabha, the government cannot survive and they cannot sustain. So such a form of democracy is basically what is called as parliamentary democracy. So where the government is formed and the government is continuously accountable to that particular parliament as well. And in the parliament specifically to whom? To the Lok Sabha. So the very essence of parliamentary democracy is what? The very essence of parliamentary democracy is the accountability of the executive to the legislature. The executives are accountable to whom? The executives are accountable to the legislature. So here what do I mean by legislature? What I mean by legislature is nothing but the Lok Sabha. And in the Lok Sabha, they shall always have a majority. And that's basically what is called as a parliamentary democracy. Is that clear? So please write down a line. A parliamentary democracy A parliamentary democracy is a form of government. A parliamentary democracy is a form of government where the executives are continuously accountable to the legislature. Where the executives are continuously accountable to the legislature. Where the executives are continuously accountable to the legislature. Where the executives are continuously accountable to the legislature. In fact, during the debates in the Constituent Assembly is a body which drafted the Indian Constitution. In fact, during the debates in the Constituent Assembly, there was one big debate in the Constituent Assembly. And what was the debate in the Constituent Assembly? The debate in the Constituent Assembly is that whether India should be a parliamentary democracy or a presidential democracy. There was no doubt whether India should be a democracy or not, but whether India should be a parliamentary democracy and a presidential democracy. If time permits, tomorrow read a little bit and come as to what is a presidential democracy and a parliamentary democracy. I'll discuss about all those things. There's one major topic in the syllabus which is called as a comparison of constitution across the world. So at the time I'll discuss, but for easy understanding, you can just read it a little bit as to India should be, what is the difference between parliamentary democracy and presidential democracy. But do you know that what is the model that the Constituent Assembly was in favor of? Parliamentary democracy or a presidential democracy in India? As of now, which model of democracy we have got? Parliamentary democracy. So therefore, it is very clear that the Constituent Assembly was in favor of what? The Constituent Assembly was in favor of what is called as parliamentary democracy. And the reason that they gave as to why they wanted to go for what is called as parliamentary democracy rather than presidential democracy is that the presidential democracy has a lot of advantages, and one important advantage of the presidential democracy is that the presidential democracy is more stable. What do you mean by the presidential democracy is more stable? That means in a presidential democracy that the government is not formed from the legislature. The president is directly or indirectly elected by the people, and who is the real executive. But whereas in India, the president is not a real executive. What type of executive is a president? Normal executive. And who is a real executive? The prime minister and the council of ministers who come from the legislature. But whereas in a presidential system, the president does not come from the legislature. The president is either directly or indirectly elected by the people. Once elected directly or indirectly by the people, then he continues to rule the country for a certain number of years, as provided in the constitution. But whereas in a parliamentary system, where does the government comes from? The government comes from the legislature. Not only the government comes from the legislature, the government is continuously accountable to the legislature. Therefore, the survival of this government in a parliamentary system depends upon what? Depends upon their ability to have the majority in the legislature. The moment they lose a majority, what will happen to this particular government? The government will become an illegitimate government, and this government can be dismissed by the president. Therefore, try to understand, some of the members in the Constituent Assembly thought that the parliamentary democracy is not a stable democracy. Why it is not a stable democracy? Because they always need to have continuous support of the legislature, and if the legislature withdraws the support, then the government may not be stable and the government may fall. And if the government is not a stable government, we will not be able to address the issues of development. Because at the commencement of the constitution, there are a lot of developmental issues in our country, and to address the developmental issues, what kind of government we need? We need a stable government. Therefore, some of the members thought that we should go for what is called as a presidential democracy rather than a parliamentary democracy. But however, the Constituent Assembly has favored in favor of what is called as a parliamentary democracy, because for them, what is more important is more than stability. For them, what is important is what is called as accountability. And which form of democracy will be more accountable to the people? A parliamentary system rather than a presidential system. Why? Because in a parliamentary system, if the government has to survive on a day-to-day basis, they should always have the majority where? In the Lok Sabha. That would make the government more accountable. So preferring accountability, we have taken what is called as the parliamentary democracy. Is that clear? Rather than what is called as the presidential democracy. So this is what basically you'll have to understand with regard to the parliamentary democracy. So please have a look into this particular question and try to answer this question. So what is the parliamentary system of government? What is the answer here? A parliamentary system of government is one which the government is responsible to the parliament and can be removed by it. That means basically the government is accountable to whom? The government is accountable to the parliament. That is, the government is accountable to the legislature. That's the very essence of what is called as parliamentary system. So is it clear to all of you as to what is democracy and what is parliamentary democracy? Is that clear? So what are the things that you have learned today? So first of all, we try to understand as to what is a constitution. Can anyone tell me what in your understanding is constitution? In your own words, just whatever we learned very quickly, we'll summarize and then we'll try to wind up the class. Yes, what is parliament? What is constitution? This is the fundamental rule book. So based on which the country is to be governed. So can anyone tell me what is the difference when you talk of the fundamental rule book, that is the rules in the constitution and the rules in the ordinary laws? Is there any difference between them? Or is there any difference basically between what is a constitutional law and what is an ordinary law? What is the difference between that?
Or power station or not help the country.
Very good. That means basically the ordinary laws lies outside the constitution. Can you give me an example of an ordinary law? Very good. Right to Education Act. All right. So that's an example of what is called as an ordinary law. Then we have also tried to understand what is a state. Can anyone tell me what is state as per the political science definition as to what is a state? It has to satisfy 4 fundamental features. What are they? People, territory, sovereignty, and government. Very good. Can anyone tell me what is the distinction between constitution and constitutionalism? Does any country which has got constitution may also have constitutionalism? They may have, but not necessarily. And when do you say that there is a constitution and also constitutionalism? Very good. So when the government is bound by the principles laid down in the constitution, that is when the principles are implemented in letter and spirit, then only we can say that there is constitutionalism as well. All right. So this is basically what you'll have to understand. What else that you have learned is we have also understood as to what is the basic difference between a written and an unwritten constitution. So basically, this is where the students have a misunderstanding. Normally, they think an unwritten constitution is not codified, but you try to understand an unwritten constitution is also codified, but it is not coming from one single source. So that it is spread across in different areas, the ordinary laws, the conventional practices, and of course the judicial presidents, they all form part of the constitution. That's basically what is called as an unwritten constitution. And in general, a written constitution is usually very rigid in nature, and an unwritten constitution is flexible in nature. And then the last thing is that in a written constitution, there is no distinction between, there's a distinction between constitutional law and an ordinary law. Such a distinction does not exist in an unwritten constitution. All right. So, and apart from that, then we understood what is democracy. Democracy is basically ruled by people. And we have seen some of the features of democracy, which includes periodic election, free and fair elections, and also what is called as universal adult suffrage. And similarly, we have also seen as to what is a parliamentary democracy. A parliamentary democracy is form of a democracy where the government is accountable to the legislature. So that's the very essence of what is called as a parliamentary democracy. All right. So when you come in the next class, we'll try to understand the other important basic features. We'll try to understand concepts like separation of powers, federal system, federation with unitary bias. We'll discuss about the judiciary as well. We'll discuss about the concept of secular state. Some of the other features in the constitution we'll try to discuss. And then this is going to likely to go on for at least another couple of classes. So I'll discuss the features and I'll discuss some of the keywords. Then we'll get into the subject. But try to revise all those things before you come to the next class. Then only it will be easy for you to follow up the class. All right. So with that, I'll wind up the class for today. Okay. So tomorrow we'll have the class in the morning and we'll continue with the remaining features. So probably we'll have to continue with these features. So you can just have a look at it. Probably what are the features we'll have to continue. So we'll have to continue all these things and then this. So I'll try to complete all these features in the next class. Then we have certain key terms to be understood as well. So I'll do that in the third class. So first week anyways, it will be only the basic thing so that you are getting familiarity with the subject. Then we'll get into the Constitution of India. All right. So with that, I'll wind up the class. Any questions before I wind up the class? No questions? No questions? All right. So revise it and come. And if you have any questions, I'll take it up. Any? Wherever it is required, I'll dictate. Wherever it is required. Say, for example, in between, I was giving the definition. So it is not, I'll dictate in all the places because sometimes students feel it is redundant for them. And it may take a lot of time also. So anyways, a detailed handout is given and wherever it is required, I'll give the important areas. But I'll suggest you to strongly take down what is called as running notes in the way that you will understand. Only your running notes will help you to revise the things in the longer run. So you'll have to write it in your own style, in your own way. It is not for others, for yourself. All right. Approximately 30 classes, maybe little more it will take. Okay. So where you will have a fair idea of the subject. All right. So thank you very much. We'll again continue tomorrow. Okay.